You know, we've talked a lot about the police budget and the obvious fact that if we've got a total city operating budget of $9 billion and the police budget is $1 billion, then you absolutely have to find some savings in that police budget if you're looking to get rid of a deficit problem. Exactly the same is true of the TTC. Of the $9.3 billion total city budget, the TTC gets a subsidy of $400 million plus capital expenditures. So we're talking a very serious amount of the total budget. And while I'll talk in a moment about the overstuffed management at the TTC, much of the big saving we simply must achieve will only come from a cooperative effort with the TTC union. Number one, get the TTC run on a much leaner basis. I don't think they know how to spell the word lean over there, let alone to live lean. It means running the thing in just a basically business-like way where you're not assuming it's Fat City, you know, any job goes, any pay goes, anybody can be hired, fill up as many floors as you can. It's like it's a contest to see who can spend the most. When TTC drivers and operators have an absenteeism rate many times the rate of other employees in private and other public businesses, it's not because they're many times sicker than you and me. Even if you take drafty buses and streetcars and exposure to coughing passengers into account, they're not going to be many times as sick as the rest of us. It just doesn't make sense. And of course, when you add to that the fact that it mysteriously seems to happen more on Fridays and Mondays than it does on other days, you know what's going on here. And when someone phones in sick, a rank-and-file TTC operator who may not be sick, shall we say, they're replaced by people who get called in and paid overtime. It costs millions. And by the way, high absenteeism rates doesn't just reflect on the people who are doing it. It reflects on management because they let it get that way. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are consultants and layers of people and executives and bag carriers and paper pushers who are on part of what I believe to be a bloated management payroll over there. I went to the website for the Sunshine List, which is the list that publishes the salaries and job descriptions of each of the people in the broader public sector who make more than $100,000 a year. And you see, if you ask me to go eyeball that, if you'd asked me to eyeball it in business and somebody brought me a similar list, I would have looked at some of these job descriptions and said, well, exactly what does that person do? And certainly what do they do for all that money and how many of them are there? Because one of those things is going to produce the wrong answer. Either there are too many of them or the job itself, even if there's only one, is obsolete and really doesn't contribute anything positive to the company, or they are paying all the people who have that job, even if it's only one, too much money. So let me give you a few examples, just taken off the list. And by the way, I only had the time because the list was much longer than I expected. There are 724 people at the TTC who make more than $100,000 a year. And when I went to the list, I only had time to go from A to G by alphabetical order of the people's last names. You know, God bless them. They've got jobs, they're making these big bucks, and nobody's coming along and saying, you know, Joe, your job actually, you know, that sort of, remember the other day I talked about sort of buggy whip repair. Well, you know, at the TTC, it might well be, coal-fired bus, mechanical supervisor. Well, we don't have any coal-fired buses anymore, but this is the kind of stuff that goes on a bit, and nobody's really gone through it and sort of said, hey, what's happening here? We can't afford this. We can't afford to make the people pay more for their tickets and their tokens. So they have something called a route supervisor. Those people are paid, and there are many of them, okay? Many. They're paid, just note the four I noted between A and G, $112,000, $126,000, $129,000, $111,000. And whatever a route supervisor does, I mean, you can imagine what it is. I mean, you can think about it. It makes sense. What do you think? I mean, do you think if we have like literally a whole bunch of them? I only counted four, and that wasn't all the ones that were listed between A and G in the alphabet. There's something called an employee relations consultant. I found two of them between A and G, $102,000, $114,000. Now, again, I understand you got to have people that deal with HR and so on and so on. We've got the executive director of human resources. He's got a better job over on the HR side. He makes $188,000 at the TTC. Again, got to have good HR. You know, the degree to which you keep good relations with and motivate and so on your employees and all that, keep them safe, all very important. $188,000. Now, here's one. We have the chief mobile supervisor. Now, I suppose that's a mobile supervisor as opposed to one that just sits on his sits still in the office and does the same supervision. Now, what I found curious was I found between A and G at least two chief mobile supervisors. Well, if you're the chief mobile supervisor, I would think there'd only be one. I mean, that's the problem over there. They got all the chiefs, you see. 109,000, 106,000 for the chief mobile supervisors. I don't know what they do. There's a four-person communications. I found three of those between A and G, 117,000, 117,000, and 120,000. What I'm saying here is that before they even think about increasing the fares, they can go through all of this and say, look, we're going to cut 10% of this out. It'll save tens of millions. They could give us a fare rebate